Alright, so you should have just finished writing a quick paragraph about your independent reading and your vocabulary. What I'd like you to do right now is turn that into the drawer for your class. Then when you're finished with that, we'll move on. By the end of today, your goal for your due date is that your essay Google Doc must be shared with me and have at least 1 introduction and 3 body paragraphs by the end of class. If you remember last class, most people were able to write 1 introduction and 1 body paragraph. I recommended that you attempt a 2nd body paragraph at home, and then your 3rd body paragraph you should be able to write in class. If you only had an intro and 1 body last time, it's okay. You can write 2 body paragraphs in class easily by the time we're done. Let's go over our learning goals. Our first learning goal for today is I will utilize meaningful transitions to connect ideas, examples, and paragraphs within my paper. So I think we all have some familiarity with transition words. If nothing else, we know like words like and or but or. Those words are good connectors for showing how different ideas relate to each other. We're going to build on that a little bit more today. Also, I will create body paragraph endings that build cohesion throughout my paper. So a lot of the time we spend a lot of our focus developing that first line, the topic sentence of each body paragraph, or coming up with which evidence or how to elaborate on it. Today I want us to also think about how we conclude that body paragraph to make it really purposeful in our writing. Let's move on. Right now I'd like everybody to go get the Chromebook that matches your phone pocket number and bring it back to your desk. You can hit play again when we're there. Alright, you're going to title your document in your Google Docs as your period number, then your first name, last name, social issues paper. Okay? So for example, this could be like 3 if you're in 3rd period. If you're in 5th period, this would be a 5. 7th period would be a 7. 3, James Smith, so that's your name. Social issues paper. And that would just be the same for everyone, so I know what document you're sharing with me. Once you've created the document, you don't need to add anything to it right away. I just want you to share it with me. So right now, yes, you will be sharing with me a blank document that you've titled with your period number, your name, and the fact that it's a social issues paper. My email address, hdietrich@conradisd.net, is what you should be sharing this with. Go ahead and do so. When you've finished, you can close your Chromebook, but keep it at your desk because we'll be coming back to them. Alright, for Writer's Workshop, we're going to go ahead and get started with our first focus for your writing today. The first focus is, strong writers use a variety of transition words to guide their readers between one idea and the next. This is kind of what we were just talking about in our learning goal. Today we're going to focus on a couple different ways we can do that. The first thing that we need to know to build strong transitions is we need to know what transitions are available. Right? If you only have a very limited category of transitions you could use, it's going to be kind of difficult for you to come up with powerful transitions between ideas. You picked up this paper on your way inside. If you would take that out now. We have some common English transition words and phrases. I really like this handout, and the reason that I gave you this handout particularly is because it gives different categories for what kind of information you would be connecting with these transitions. So if you're just adding additional information, you could use words like and, not only this, but also this, also, moreover, furthermore, or in addition. Notice I gave you a little bit of a hint that those last 3 are more formal. And so if you're trying to like dress up the formality of your paper, make it sound particularly educated, those could be some fun ones to utilize at different points. And they're used very similar to those other ones you're more familiar with, like and. Some of the examples we see here is like, cheating is dishonest. Moreover, it hinders students from learning. So we see how that makes that connection. If you're providing an example for something in your paper, you could use some of these fun phrases like for example, for instance, specifically, in particular, the first, second, another, etc. example or reason. So like, if you're talking about fruit that you love, you could say, I love fruit. In particular, I like bananas, pineapples, and berries. So one thing that you might notice here is that in these examples, you can see how they would be punctuated. And so if you're like, I would really like to use this cool new transition word, but I'm not quite sure how to do it, you see some different examples that are not related to the topic of your paper, but do use those transitions correctly. If you're trying to show a contrast, you could use some of these words like but, however, on the other hand, otherwise, instead, or in contrast. Bill earned an A on his essay, but Susan got a B. Or, I'm not going out tonight. Instead, I will stay home and watch a video. Do we know what it means to show a concession? It's not quite like at a football game when you buy nachos, okay? But it's like to concede or like give in to something. So you could use words like yet, nevertheless, even so, however, although, or even though. Like, I need to wear reading glasses. Nevertheless, I hate how I look in them. That would show a clear connection between how those two ideas relate. Do we see how much more powerful that is when we have that transition, rather than if we just left it without? I need to wear reading glasses. I hate how I look in them. That doesn't really make sense without a powerful transition word to show us the relationship between the two ideas. A couple more of the concessions, despite the fact that, or despite, could also be useful. Like, despite the fact that Kate is good at tennis, she lost the match. Or we could creatively come up with one related to one of our topics, such as, despite the fact that Hitler is recognized as being one of the most cruel leaders, he was actually pretty intelligent about how he took power in Germany. Okay? We could show a similarity using words like likewise, similarly, or in the same way. We could show a result of something with so as a result, therefore, thus, as a consequence, or consequently. We could also establish time relation or sequence. This is particularly good if you're walking through like historically how something occurred. You say first, second, finally, in conclusion, in summary, or meanwhile to show when things happen. For example, you could say, in summary, we should offer her some financial help. Jeff was working hard to clean the house. Meanwhile, his brother was watching TV. And we see how these transition words kind of connect those ideas and show how they relate to the other concept. You could also show a condition. This is like, well, in order for this other thing to happen, we have to have, by using or, whether this or that, or if. And then finally, if you just want to like provide particular emphasis for something, you can explain or emphasize using words like in fact, actually, or in other words. All right? So those are just some good ways that you could use different transition words. Now let's look for a second at how another author might use those transition words. Okay, so let's take out this article called Fishers of Men, the Neglected Effects of Environmental Depletion on Labor Trafficking in the Thai Fishing Industry. Make sure you have that out. It's something you picked up on your way inside. This is by Joanna G. Silwester. It's a fun last name. We're going to go ahead and start with the introduction. And as we do, I'm going to notice what some of the transitions are that are used here by the author. I want you to mark these as I mark them so that you can pay attention to those transitions as well. And then maybe you can pull away from those as you're working on your own. So let's start. In March 2013, 14 Myanmarese men were rescued from a fishing port in Koh Tang, Thailand. They had been working on a large fishing trawler for over 6 months. On one of the few occasions, so this is kind of a connection here, on one of the few occasions that transitions between events, right? The vessels came into port. These men were detained in a storage facility and locked away until the vessel on which they worked set sail. So we have and is connecting ideas, and we also have until the vessel on which they worked set sail. So we have some time words, and we also have some addition words. Then we start off again. During their confinement, they were forced to watch fellow victims beaten for attempting to flee. Wow, that's a powerful beginning paragraph. We notice there's a lot of information presented, and we already are being able to build connections between the different pieces of information the author has included. Let's continue. These men began working on the vessel because is another transition word showing us the reason why. After fleeing to Thailand from Myanmar, Burma, a labor broker promised them employment in factories with good conditions. Instead, the men were subjected to 6 months of unpaid work aboard 3 different Thai fishing vessels. They endured 20-hour working days, suffered violent beatings, and even witnessed the brutal murder of one of the laborers on the ship. Here we have and. That kind of shows emphasis for how extreme it is. These violent occurrences and arduous conditions came to light when the men, we have when, shows us time, after selling dried squid to a transfer vessel in exchange for a cell phone, reported their conditions to family members who then sought to help. So we have after, this again gives us time. Do we see how these transition words are helping us have a better understanding for what's going on? Do we notice a pattern? Are the transition words at any particular point in the paragraph, or do they happen kind of all throughout? You might notice that it's not just the first line. Sometimes we get really excited about having a transition right here when the paragraph begins, and then we cut them out of the rest of our writing. Instead, every time we introduce a new idea within our paragraph or a new example, those transitions can build and help us create a more meaningful statement, okay? The narrative of these men is not unusual. The conditions these men face as victims of human trafficking and forced labor are the result of both Thailand's changing labor landscape and environmental conditions. Both affect Thailand's fishing industry, and the international regulatory bodies have attempted to harness legal solutions designed to eradicate this problem. This comment argues, however, what was however? I think that was one of our concessions, right? Where we're going to show that there's an exception. This comment argues, however, that the unique conditions of labor trafficking in Thailand's fishing industry cannot be resolved by regulating labor alone. Neither, so now we're showing a negation, neither the complex causes of labor trafficking nor regulations addressing it can be isolated from institutional recognition of overfishing in Thailand's coastal waters. Both the causes and responses, so here we have both and, to trafficking demonstrate the importance of emphasizing environmental regulations alongside labor regulations. So we see how they're crafting this argument about how it's unfair. Remember our original concept? Is that it's unfair that the labor trafficking in the fishing industry of Thailand is hurting the citizens that are involved in it. Let's just go a little bit further together, and then I'll release you to do a little bit of this on your own, okay? Of this comment, part 2 of this comment details how, as a result of Thailand's economic and environmental conditions, many of these men are identifiable victims of human trafficking and forced labor. Here we have as a result, is also going to give us a meaningful connection. Then we have and. Part 3 identifies the 3 major qualities of these men that make them vulnerable as victims. Here's one that we don't use very often or recognize as a transition, but the word that is able to give us a description. So sometimes if we want to give a description, like, what about these men? What about these qualities? These qualities that make them vulnerable as victims. We might be able to use the word that to connect a description to one of our subjects, okay? Their migrant status, their gender, and current environmental conditions. Part 4 will highlight how legal measures focused on labor trafficking may theoretically include men and migrants, but in practice let them slip through the cracks. Finally, this one means we're conclusive. Part 5 addresses the concept of environmental mainstreaming and argues that it can be used to improve current labor trafficking laws. We have that again. So it argues what? It argues that it can be used to improve current labor trafficking laws. So we might see how these things come together in order to make a powerful connection and help us understand what's going on in the passage. What I'd like for you to do is at your table with your partner, I would like you to read this section 2, Men Coerced into Thailand's Fishing Industry Are Victims of Forced Labor and Human Trafficking. And then you'll go ahead and read until you get to B. You can stop right here above this section. All right? Go ahead and do that. Afterwards, I'll have you move straight into writing. So as soon as you and your partner are finished talking about the transitions that you see, use this as a guide, imitate some of the kinds of transitions you see in the writing here, and then begin writing in your own. All right, here's just a quick reminder for what you need to be working on. Continue working on your body paragraphs of your essay. Consider where transitions could make your arguments more clear, and consider which transitions best signify the relationship between the 2 ideas you're communicating. So go ahead and keep working on these topics once you're finished with your annotating those transitions, and then we'll have another quick video with one more strategy before you go. Thank you.